In this example, I'm going to show you a sample program that really processes an array. So it does things like it adds up, it'll read some information from a file into an array, and then it will find the total of these values. It'll find the average. It'll also find the highest and lowest values. So first I want to show you that I went into Notepad and I created an input file called sales.txt, and you can see it has some sales amounts in it. I'm going to use these numbers in just a second. And I also want to show you where my files are located. Here's the name of my source code, salesarray.cpp, and here you can see that I have my salesarray.cpp and my input file both in the same location. They're both in this folder called CS2 files. Okay, so here we're going to see I have a constant declared number of offices is 15, and here I declare an array that's going to hold 15 sales amounts, one for each of the different offices. I do have an input file declared, which is just called data in. Office is just going to be a counter, so as I read in data from the file, I'm going to increment that counter, and this is just going to be used for my for loop. I'm going to have a double variable called total sales, and total sales is going to add up the total sales. It's going to need to start at 0, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. I'm going to calculate the average sales, the highest sales, and the lowest sales. So we're going to start like we did in a similar program here, and I'm just going to use an open statement to open up the file. And here I'm just doing a little bit of error checking to make sure that the file was opened properly, and if it doesn't, you'll get this error message, and it will exit at this point. You might have noticed that I had an uppercase. With file names, it doesn't really matter, so I might just do that to make more sense for people. And then we're going to fill the array with the data from the files. So this is going to be, we're going to count how many things we read in. So we're at Office 0 now. While we haven't reached the end of our input file, we're going to read from the file and we're going to store it in the array. Now I want you to remember, I'm just going to copy my data here for a second just so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to comment it out for right now. I'm going to do Control plus. We'll comment out all these lines just so you can see them. But when Office is 0, it's going to read this first value from the file, right? And it'll store it in, the array, and it'll store that at index 0. And then Office is going to become 1. I haven't reached the end of file yet, so it'll read the next value, which is this one, and it will store it in sales sub 1, right? And then this is going to be in sales sub 2, etc., etc. And then at this point, I'm going to close my input file because I've read all the data from the input file, so I don't need it any longer. Okay. Now this is a concept from for loops in general and totaling of values in a list of numbers, and we do this early on in computer science 1 when we're talking about loops, but here we're going to do it an example with an array. So index is just my loop counter. You could just use I if you want. I'm using index in this example, and keep in mind that when we finish with this while loop, Office should be holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items. So this is going to go from index to 0 to 7, right? Because this would be sales 2, sales 3, sales 4, sales 5, sales 6, and sales 7. So remember with arrays, if the size is 8 or we have 8 things, the indices are going to range from 0 to 7. Now, this is just a simple for loop. If you like to, clarify things, you can put curly braces around the body, but if there is no curly braces, the next one statement is the body of the loop. So keep in mind, right, I'm using a plus equal sign, and that's really just the same as total sales equals total sales plus this. Sorry, plus. Anytime you have this on the left and right hand side of the equal sign, you can, make that a little bit shorter. And let me just leave this here to show you what's going to happen the first time through the loop. Remember, total sales up here was initialized to 0. So first time through the loop, you're going to get 0, right, plus whatever's stored at sales sub index, and index is 0. So it's going to be this value here, 10,000, and that equals 10,000. Now the next time through the loop, it's going to be total sales, which is 10,000, plus whatever's at index 1. So we're going to add to that 10,500, and that'll give us 20,500. So now our total sales is 20,500, and the next time through the loop when index is 2, it's going to add to that value 11,000. Right? And that's going to keep going on that way, so that's going to be what? 31,500, and it's just going to keep adding those values together. Let me just put a little comment in front of that. And then to find the average, we just take this total sales when we're all done and we divide it by our office, which with this input file is going to be 8. Okay? And note, we have this as 15. We're only using 8 of them, and that's fine. All right, so here's a little algorithm to find the highest and the lowest sales amounts. What we do is we set the highest to the first one and the lowest to the first one. So they're both going to be 10,000, right, at this point. And then we go through the rest of the elements. So I only need to start at index 1 since I'm already setting whatever's in index 0 here. If I set it to 0, it's still going to work. But if sales sub 0 is great, or sales sub index, which is sales sub 1, which right now is 10,500. So let's just think about what's in these guys, right? This guy is 10,000, and this one is 10,000, and index is now 1. So what we're doing here is we're comparing what's at sales sub 1, which we know is 10,500. So we're checking if 10,500 is greater than 10,000. Yes, it is. So then our highest now, right, becomes 10,500. Same thing here now, but it's checking less than. So this guy is checking is 10,500 less than 10,000. Oops, I forgot a 0 up here. And the answer to that is no, so it just bypasses this because it's not a lower value. And it just kind of goes through that process, and that's just an algorithm to find the highest and lowest, and then we display everything out. Okay, so let's see what this looks like when it runs. All right, here's the total, here's the average, here's the highest, here's the lowest, and you can actually, obviously 10,000 as the lowest was true, 20,000 as the highest was true, and you'd have to add those together just to verify things. All right, but that's kind of a little bit about array processing, very common to accumulate a total, and you have to make sure, we call it accumulating a total or accumulating a sum. But generally, this variable that accumulates or holds those values has to be initialized to 0. And remember, I showed you the plus equal sign, right? That's just a shortcut way to do that. Calculating the total. And here is an algorithm that helps you find the highest and the lowest.